Dennis Prager has a history of distorting and smearing the word secular. Here's his latest video. Let's see how this one goes.
It has become a dogma of progressive ideology that America is a secular nation. What do people mean by secular?
Well, we mean no persecution and no special privileges based on religious belief. We believe in equality under the law.
The argument goes this way. Since the Constitution establishes a strict separation of church and state, religion has no place in how the country is to be governed. Religion is a purely private matter, and therefore must be kept out of politics or public policy making. There is a problem with this claim, however. It's false. What the Constitution actually does when it comes to religion is first, ban religious tests of any sort for public office. That's in Article 6. And second, forbid the enactment of any law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
Right.
Those are the words of the First Amendment. The plain meaning of those words is that Congress was forbidden from, 1, establishing a national church on the model of the Church of England, and 2, attempting to disestablish or interfering with the established churches that existed in some of the states, in certain cases for decades after ratification of the First Amendment. But what about the separation of church and state? That's in the Constitution too, isn't it? Well, no.
Nobody argues
Try
that it
as you
does.
might, you will not find the words separation of church and state in the Constitution.
You will also not find life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in the Bible.
The famous phrase comes from a letter that Thomas Jefferson, who was not at the Constitutional Convention, he was in France at the time, wrote years later to a Baptist community in Danbury, Connecticut. Jefferson, in his characteristically eloquent way, was simply trying to capture the spirit of the First Amendment prohibiting the establishment of a national religion.
Okay.
The author of the Declaration of Independence was committed to an America where people were free to practice any faith or no faith as their consciences dictate.
And that right there is what secularism means. If they're saying that's not what secularism is, then what is the word for this? In America where people were free to practice any faith or no faith as their consciousnesses dictate. What's the word for that? For people like me, the word for that is secular. If that is not secular, then please tell me, Prager University, what is the word for this?
None of the Founding Fathers, including Jefferson, who was among the least religious of them, though not an atheist, ever entertained the idea that there was to be a separation of religion from public life or from politics.
And that's not what
The
secularism
secularists
is.
claim that our Constitution consigns religion to the purely private sphere.
What secularists are you talking about? These people are making up. What are you talking about? Are you talking about Marxists? Marxists are not secularists. What is this group of people? This seems to be an imaginary group of people in the mind of Dennis Prager and the people on his video. Who are these people?
Is contradicted by the words and actions of the greatest figures in American history, from Washington, who called for national days of prayer, to Lincoln, who proclaimed a national day of prayer and fasting, to Martin Luther King. King, of course, was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, a Baptist clergyman who fought racial segregation and discrimination in the most explicitly biblical terms.
Who fought racial segregation, discrimination in the most explicitly biblical terms. What does that even mean?
If you believe the secularist understanding of the separation of church and state, Martin Luther King violated that doctrine in almost everything he did.
No, that is a complete lie.
And so did every president in American history. Every single one invoked God in his inaugural address.
Secularism doesn't mean somebody elected president can't invoke God in their inaugural address. It means they don't have to. Wow.
For Martin Luther King, as for so many other Americans, racial injustice was not only a violation of the Golden Rule, but first and foremost, a violation of the teaching of the book of Genesis.
The Bible was used for centuries to justify slavery. And now this guy is going to say if you're against racial injustice, you must be following the book of Genesis, even though slavery is condoned in the Bible. And the slaves are certainly not equal to their slave masters.
That every human being is made in the image and likeness of
Image and likeness does not mean equal.
God. There are in the world truly secularist regimes. France, with its system of laïcité, religion must be exercised only in the private, not the public sphere, is one. So, of course, are the communist regimes of China, Cuba, and North Korea. In such regimes, secularism is the...
Okay, state atheism is not secularism. That's the opposite of secularism. China is not secular, and you're not allowed to practice your religion, even privately. They've removed Christmas displays from private homes, and of course, they've subjugated the Muslim community horribly. So religious freedom does not exist in China. That is not secularism. This is a lie. This is ridiculous.
Official public philosophy. And religion is, to the extent it is permitted at all, restricted to the private domain.
Not even allowed in the private domain.
But that is not an accurate description of the United States.
Well, no shit, because the United States is secular.
At all. And how could it be? Although we separate the institutions of religion from those of government, we do that not to make religion subservient to the state, but rather to protect it from the state.
That's not true. The origin of secularism had nothing to do with atheism. It had to do with protecting religious sects from other religious sects in colonies. Before this umbrella term Christian, nobody called themselves a Christian. They called themselves Baptist or Protestant or Catholic. We're in a colony where a certain government structure got taken over by essentially Catholics. And then they made rules where in order to be part of that structure, you had to be a Catholic, a religious test. This is why Thomas Jefferson created secularism to protect Christian sects from other Christian sects. It had nothing to do with atheism and certainly had nothing to do with protecting churches from government.
We are, after all, a nation which, in its very founding document, acknowledges the Creator, God Himself, as the source of justice owed to all human beings. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
And right after that passage, it says the power comes from the consent of the government by men. That's the passage right after this. And keep in mind, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is nowhere in the Bible, and yet they point this out. Oh, the word creator, that means we're a Judeo-Christian nation. We're not. We're a nation built on philosophy, based on Greek philosophy, Roman philosophy. The first democracy was in Athens, Greece, before Christ, by people who worship Zeus and never heard of the Torah. And Thomas Jefferson himself was certainly not a Christian you would think of today. He believed that the virgin birth story in the Bible was a myth. He didn't believe in those miracles. And once again, right after that, the power of men comes from the consent of the governed.
Far from being secularist, the American constitutional order holds that our fundamental rights are not privileges conferred by any merely human power. They are rather gifts, endowments from God Himself. And they are unalienable. That is, they cannot legitimately be taken away by government or any other human authority, precisely because they were not given to us by any human authority. Indeed, we couldn't give them away even if we wanted to.
So this is to argue that Thomas Jefferson was a divine prophet, that his words overrule anything in the Bible, because certainly that equality doesn't exist in the Bible. Nowhere in the Bible, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you have inequality between slaves and slave master, between men and women. You have the slaughtering of certain groups of people. Moses, God's moral lawgiver, slaughtering the Midianites, including women and children. So this is not biblical. The United States of America was not built on the Bible. It was built on philosophy. And it's a very naive thing to say that the government can't take away these rights. We know the government can take away these rights. We see what's happening now. We see what happened when the Japanese were put in internment camps and have had all their rights taken away. So these rights don't enforce themselves. They need men who believe in them, men and women who believe in them, and that will promote them and that will protect them. They're just paper otherwise, and the government can absolutely take these rights away. We know that through history. It is extremely naive to say that some kind of deity is going to come out of the sky and protect somebody from having their rights taken away from government. We know that's not the case.
Why? Because they come from the hand of God.
Not according to the Bible.
So is the claim that America is a secular nation true?
Yes.
The answer should now be clear.
I hope so. Look at the first commandment in the Bible. It is not secular. It says, "You shall worship none other than the God of Abraham." You will only have one God. Whereas the First Amendment of the Constitution says you can have any God you want or no God at all. And this is the philosophy of Thomas Jefferson, who once said, "Whether someone has 20 gods or no gods, it neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg."
I'm Robert George, McCormick Professor of Jurisprudence and Director of the James Madison Program at Princeton University for Prager University.
So there we have it, another misguided video from PragerU to smear and distort the word secular, which simply means no persecution, no special privileges based on faith, equality under the law. It goes under this umbrella term of individualism, individual rights and liberties deserved of every person, a focus on human value, individual value of every person on the face of the earth. Once again, the United States of America was built on philosophy. Anyway, thanks for watching. Until next time.
Cisco, do we have to leave all our good friends now?
Only until next time, Pancho. Adios, amigos.